And good evening, good Sunday evening, everybody. And how is everybody doing? Welcome to another episode of the Top 50 Classic Adventure Modules of All Time. My name is Chris, and I'm your co-host. And to my virtual left, as always, or maybe right, I'm not sure. It depends on which way you're looking at it. Is Rick. Rick, say hi to everybody.
Hey, folks. How's life treating you, Chris? I know you are beaming in from a hotel room at the moment.
I am in a hotel room outside of Richmond, Virginia, on vacation, working my way down to Myrtle Beach for a week, or not quite a week, but a good portion of a week, to play mini golf. So I'm really looking forward to it. I've already played a really awesome mini golf inside
Hmm.
downtown Richmond. It's basically a historical building, and it's a hotel, and they've converted it into a mini golf course, which is kind of neat. Kind of catered to the older crowd, and they try to offer you a drink every time you're trying to play mini golf. But outside of that, we were there for the mini golf, not for the overpriced cocktails. But
Mhm.
it was cool. It was a cool experience. So one of many rounds of mini golf that will be played the next
Nice.
I take some vacation. How's everything going with you these days? How is that new game table? I've
It
heard so much about.
the we're breaking it in. The table is good. I am sitting at it while we speak. It's beautiful and wonderful. Um, Last night, this is going to sound like a free plug, but they're not giving me anything. Last night, my son and I went to the Price is Right live here in New Jersey,
Oh, whoa! What
and
that
I had a name
really?
tag with my
That's
name on it.
come on, back up. That's a thing. Like,
That's a
what is that?
thing. There is a traveling version of The Price is Right and Wheel of Fortune, and you can go see either one in person.
Whoa!
And you can get asked to come on down
No,
and play. Now, I did not personally get asked to come on down, but we were in the third row, and it was fun. And if anybody's into that, I would highly recommend it. That was our thing last night. So,
what was there legit prizes and everything?
oh
And like,
yeah, yeah,
wow, Drew
yeah.
isn't there though, right?
No, there was not. There was a MC who I know from television who has done many game shows. So we didn't get like a cut rate
What,
MC.
what's the name of said
I'm
person?
trying to remember the guy's name, and I know him too. I can't remember his name, but him and the announcer, the guy who's like the general announcer, were
Yeah, yeah,
really. I was just telling somebody this. They were on the money.
yeah. It wasn't
Uh,
Chuck Berry, I'm guessing. So.
no, I wish. But yeah, Drew never leaves California every day. So they have a sort of traveling version of the show, and then they've got Drew in California. And it's sort of a condensed version of the show. So there are some slight alterations, but you have if you know Price is Right,
Oh,
like they had the yodel guy in the mountain, and they
oh,
had,
they're the Yodel guy. Plinko had
and
to
they
be
had
Plinko.
Plinko and all that stuff. So, and
Uh,
they even had at one point they said like a person who was playing Plinko, they said whatever she won on the stage, one randomly drawn audience member would win the identical
that's cool.
amount of money, and they did things like that. So it was fun. It was definitely if you're looking for something different. So there we go. Free plug for the the Price is
Okay,
Right.
sponsor us. Sponsor us. Whatever.
Yeah, really. Give us a sponsor, guys.
So very much so. All right. Well, we're
So
here
yeah,
to
good times.
count down the top 50 classic adventure modules of all time, and we are on numbers 15 all the way down to 11. That's right, kids. After
Mm,
tonight, we will be at the top 10 in the last
wow.
two episodes. Well, there'll be two episodes, and then there'll be one more kind of like wrap up episode.
Yeah.
We're going to do like a stats episode and have a lot of fun with that and everything. So we're gonna get right to it. And hopefully my hotel internet will hold out. But if my screen freezes or my voice goes away or something, then we know that we'll have issues, and Rick is just gonna have to be a trooper and take over.
That no problem. And I see Commander Solo knows Plinko. So there we go. We got
All
we got
right,
one
we got
we
one
got one
person.
Price is Right fan in the audience.
Awesome, awesome. So great. So all right, so let's get to it. Let's get to number 15.
Number 15.
All right.
There we
So
have it.
yes, so
We knew that was coming, right?
we knew this one was coming. So this is
Yeah.
1 through 3 against the Giants. Now, interesting that it's not GDQ 1 through 7,
Yeah.
and already had We already had G2 and G3 on this list,
Mhm.
I believe. I think G1 is the only one that has been missing on this list. So we did this top 50. We basically said you can vote for whatever book you want. So theoretically, you could have voted for G3, you could have voted for G1, G2, G3, G1 through 3, and GD2. We want. I don't think anybody did that, but that will be really curious to go back and look and see if they did.
Yeah.
But anyway, so that's how we did it. So yes, the classic 3 adventures written by Gary Gygax that started off the Giants campaign. Classic high level dungeon crawling. This is the way I like to sum these adventures up. We've talked about this on the show before. Economy of words.
Oh yeah.
I mean, 8 pages to 12 pages long each. I think G3 I think might have cracked in at 16 pages.
I think you're right.
Gygax might have went crazy, put an extra level in there and a couple four extra pages, but just a lot of content for a short amount of words, and something that we even to this day look back to, and we try to get our writers to kind of
Mhm.
assimilate that exact thing, where get across a lot in a short number of words. Don't be too wordy. It's probably
Mhm.
the biggest issue that you have with young writers these days. So so what do you think of G123, Rick?
Yeah, I mean, it's an enduring classic. I agree wholeheartedly as far as the economy of words, especially with G1 and G2. The so much they have packed into those short number, into that like 1 page signature or 2 page signatures or whatever it is just, it honestly blows my mind how much is in there. Uh, when you think back of the richness of the adventure and how many encounter areas are in there. Now, granted, some of the encounter areas are a little terser or whatever, but still, just to have a 2 level dungeon in what, 8 pages or 12 pages or whatever, it blows my mind. So, there's that. Me, it's one of my favorites. I love all the individual components. Like you, I think G2 now is my favorite. G3 was,
Mhm.
but I think since we went over this in talking TSR and in various places, the stock of G2 has risen and the stock of G3 has come down a little bit, I guess
Yeah.
is the best way to play it. And maybe I think a little more fondly of G1, which was always my redheaded stepchild of the three, I guess. So that's the best way to put it. But I think all 3 components are good. I love the emphasis on environment here, certainly in
Yeah.
the first 2. But even though the third one is very dungeony, there is such a shift in environment because, there I think first time out of the gate, especially, I think there was an inherent danger in them doing multiple giant adventures in a row. It would be very easy to fall into a similar pattern and just be like, well, these guys have swords and these guys throw rocks, and like, what's the difference? Where you're in these different dungeons. Each dungeon has its own feel, its own vibe, its own way the people within it behave. Some are a little more chaotic and rebellious as far as the servants, some are more orderly. You really, I don't know, I feel the difference when I'm in these various ones. And as I mentioned many times, the environmental factors in G2 I think are just awesome. For a very non-linear dungeon in G2, you just have this sandboxy feel because they're putting you in that glacial rift, and you kind of feel like you're just wandering through caves initially, and you can kind of go anywhere, and it's just, I think, a masterstroke of design.
Yeah, I agree. I think you summed it up perfectly. I think G3 used to be my favorite, and then G2 really kind of became elevated after we did our review. And I remember really not particularly caring for G1, and I think I respect G1 a lot more now.
Hmm.
I do. I guess the big part of G1 was always that fight in the Great Hall that
Yeah,
was completely unbalanced, and just was just a crazy putting that fight together.
yeah.
So I think that is part of it, and also I didn't particularly care for the second level dungeon, a lot of orcs and stuff like that.
Mhm.
Now I understand older that yes, you were supposed to incite the orcs and basically use them as your footmen essentially to
Yeah,
distract the giants and stuff like that. But back in the day, I didn't. I guess I didn't get some of those nuanced
yeah.
design and everything. So yeah, I agree. And I used to really love G3, and I'll agree 100% with you that it's definitely about environment. There, you got
Mhm.
nice 3 different environments. I wish I wish for a few things on this. And again, looking back, and it's easy to say this, like, I wish we would have gotten 6 giant adventures. I
Oh
wish
yeah.
that Stone, Cloud, and Storm.
Yeah.
Also, I understand that that would have really kind of pushed the boundaries of believability on how you could kind of do this.
Mhm.
But that's probably my biggest regret, and maybe
Yeah.
even maybe some of the other giants were in. I know there's some stone giant emissaries in the one,
Mhm.
and I know there's a cloud giant. Another, I can't remember. Is there a storm giant? I don't even know if there's a storm giant, but there is. There's a token storm giant that's a prisoner in G3 somewhere. But I felt that was kind of a little bit of a missed opportunity.
Yeah.
And I've always kind of wanted that, but I guess I was probably viewing that from not understanding that we were going to get D1 through 3 and then Q1 after
Mhm.
that. Once you put it in that perspective, yeah, that's a lot. That would have been a lot to ask
Yeah.
for six giant adventures and then 3 adventures and then, the climax. I would love to see a modern game company do its take on this. Hint, hint, hint. Oh my God, what could that
Well,
possibly mean?
we can always hope, can't we? You never know what might show up.
Yeah. So, but yeah. So, what else? Do you have any shortcomings of these adventures, or do you think this is about the right spot for it, number 15 on the list, or do you think it's high, low? Uh,
I think this spot or a touch higher would be fine.
okay.
I mean, for me, I'm very torn whether I would want to see G1 to 3 or the whole kind of 6, and I'll excuse Q1 out of that, but just, but honestly, I think when I look back on it, that the giant modules are more solid than the descent modules, although there
Mhm.
are elements in the descent series that I really love. I think we're both fans of D2 to an extent. I just think G3 overall is more solid, and you could certainly pull out any one of the G3 modules and run it individually. Now, when I think of shortcomings, I don't have a whole lot. I mean, it's like you said, there's certainly some aspects where they yielded to maybe realism of setup, but not adventure flow in G1, because you could, and the funny thing is, we think of it reverse these days. I think we tend to think of modern day adventures leaning more into realistic ecologies and things like that, where in a way, the realistic ecology of G1 was a major down point because,
Yeah.
it made sense for the Great Hall maybe to be where it is, but it didn't make sense for the adventure to have adventurers blundering in that and maybe TPK'd right in the beginning. So, um, and G3, I always wish G3 had leaned a little more into the environment of the hell furnaces. I know we've got the lava on the bottom, but it does feel very much like a couple dungeon levels. And I really wish somehow we had a little more fire and flame and a little more, I don't know, something in there, or maybe even a little outdoor encounter or two before we got inside, kind of the way Gygax had done with some other things. I wish, something like he did with the Temple of Thurs done, maybe where you're fighting a little fight or a defensive battle outside, anything just to invoke that cool environment of the hell furnaces, because the characters basically go from the crystal mist to the hell furnaces from G2 to G3, and you couldn't even tell the difference really until you get to the third level. So that would be my major deficiency, I guess, of the series. Is I just wish G3 had leaned into the environment even more.
Yeah. Yeah. I always thought the connective branches between the adventures was always a little bit weak with that magic chain that would teleport
Yeah.
you. Again, I understand what they were going for because those locations were like hundreds of miles apart
Yeah.
from each other. So it would be kind of not realistic to expect somebody to wander from G2 to G3.
Mhm.
And there's that classic, oh, you find a scrap of a map kind of thing, but then they have to go follow it. And it's like, if you show it to them, are they going to really say, oh, let's go travel 250 miles to the south?
Yeah.
I mean,
Yeah.
it's probably not going to happen. So,
No, it's
so
a serious choke point. I
yeah,
had a group I ran that didn't find the magical chain, that they
yeah,
went to the cave and they missed the magical chain. And I forget what I did, but I think I had to use a little DM carte blanche and basically kind of give it to them because they
yeah,
went right past it.
yeah.
So,
But but the other thing to keep in mind too is these were tournament adventures,
yeah,
and they were not designed for campaign play, and they were kind of shoehorned into campaign play afterwards, which most of the classic adventures, especially the
yeah,
ones on our list, were that
oh
way.
yeah,
They all started their life as a
yeah,
tournament adventure and then were repurposed basically. And some of them they gave a lot more attention and word count to making them kind of more of a campaign friendly adventure.
Mhm.
And others they really didn't. Others they just kind of presented to you pretty much as is, and then you kind of took it from there. It wasn't really until some of the later adventures where you actually started seeing them that were specifically designed
Yeah.
for campaign, but home campaign play and to drop into
Yeah.
your own setting and everything.
It's
So
really fascinating how many of these, books we consider the great modules that were tourney adventures.
yeah,
And like you said, it shows in this. I always have complained about the kind of lead in for G1, the hook, if you will, is just basically go take care of these giants or you're going to get in trouble kind of
yeah,
thing. And they
yeah,
leave it at that. But again, I could see that being a tournament thing where they just sit you down and they want to get you right
yeah,
into that first room and get things moving and they don't have time to mess around with preamble. So
yeah, exactly. So, yeah. Any other final thoughts on G1 through 3?
no, I just think it stands among the greats.
Okay.
It's certainly something that to me that helped define Gygax as being sort of the adventure genius that we view him as is this campaign series.
Yeah. Interesting. I mean, obviously, G1 through 3 was not on the dungeon top 30 list from 20
Mhm.
years ago, but GDQ 1 through
Yeah.
7 was the number one. So, I thought that was kind of interesting. So, we don't have an apples to apples comparison,
Mhm.
but yeah, so that's that. So, I think with that, I think we will move over to our next one, which is number 14.
Okay.
Number 14.
Surprise, surprise.
This is interesting. And you already alluded to it once, how you were
Yes.
not even considering Queen of the Demonweb pits to be part of this series. So
Yeah.
number 14, Q1, Queen of the Demonweb pits. I will say with no uncertainty when I crunched all the numbers for this top 50 list, this was probably the biggest surprise that I
Yeah.
saw. I could not believe. Yeah, I mean, it just I remember basically being like, "Wait, what?" And then I went back to check my math because I suck at math. That's why I'm not a mathematician.
Which is why you're a writer.
And was a biologist before that. But it just boggled my mind, and I actually this is like we're gonna get into this in our for the last show. We're gonna kind of dive in because I did ask
Mhm.
folks to put comments down on
Mhm.
their top list and everything. This one obviously showed up a lot on the list,
Mhm.
obviously because it made number 14. As far as I can tell, the main reason before we get into like what we think about this adventure, the main reason that this one made the list was a lot of people said the same thing. First planar adventure.
Yeah.
And really when you think back to it, it was the first one that really leaned into this is what the outer planes could look like. I mean, you can make the argument that this one laid the foundation for Sigil and Planescape, which would
Mhm.
come years after that and everything.
Yeah.
So I think that's where it really kind of it shines. Where you look at the adventure, whereas the Giants ones were the first, high level dungeon crawls, and you just go through the different classic tropes and everything that hit. And I guess
Mhm.
this one really hit the very first planar adventure. So what is your overall thoughts of Q1?
Yeah. Um, I'm not, I've made no bones about the fact in the past that I'm not a huge fan of this. There's elements I like in here, but overall, I definitely find it a very like jarring tonal shift from nobody had to tell me there was a different author on this one. And I still have memories, when I was young of picking this up because all the other modules when I had picked them up, they had the mono covers and this one had the color cover. And I remember that color cover just jumping out at me. And I also kind of knew it was the capstone of this long campaign. And I was just like, wow, I couldn't wait to get home and dig into this thing. And then I remember reading and seeing technology and seeing the mechanisms of the spider ship and an engine room. And I was like, what? And at that time, I was definitely more in the, no peanut butter in my chocolate camp of D&D where I didn't want technology or gnomes tinkering with mechanisms or any of that stuff in my first edition campaign. So I think that colored my perceptions, maybe. So that's my big take on it is, and I agree, like as far as going out there and being brave and approaching a planar adventure, you got to give them hands off because they had their work cut out for them to be the first ones to kind of, for Sutherland to venture out, and that territory was pretty brave. Um, and in fairness, on the hindsight of, again, having reviewed these things for many years now, I don't know, like when I look at the end of D3, as much as it's beloved, I found the Thane very boring. I found the end, looking for any kind of climax type of feeling from the end of D3. I didn't get it. I almost got the sense that Gygax was kind of getting tired at that point of writing, or busy with other things, or whatever it was, that just that vigor that was in earlier elements of the campaign just to me was not showing at the end of D3. So, it's easy for us to kind of criticize, I think, this one, but we don't know what we would have gotten if Gygax would have penned G3. It might have been worse. We don't know what I'd love to go into an alternate reality, and that would be something to see Gygax's take on it. Because from everything I've read, Gygax, he was not a fan, that he just kind of went with the flow, that Brian Bloom and whoever wanted was like, let's just let Sutherland do this, and he had other things to do. And Gygax later wrote on Dragonfoot, um, basically that he liked the maze and he didn't like anything else. That he pictured the Demonweb of this very creepy, dark place with spiders creeping around, and maybe the characters would have to go from place to place in this web, getting to the center of this web, and that's how he would have done it. And he said as soon as it went to the spider ship, he was kind of like us, that he was like, "What is this?" So I don't think Gygax's take was completely similar to mine. So
Yeah, I would agree. It's definitely a little jarring, the spider ship part of it. I mean, I get it. A lot of the classic Appendix N literature that was the formation of D&D, and certainly was prevalent, back in the 70s and early 80s, and it was the core inspirations. I get that there was very much a mix of some technology and your fantasy. I mean, I agree with you. It's funny though. I never thought the Q1 technology and mechanical spider ship and everything was as overt as S3 Expedition of the Barrier Peaks. That was completely over the top,
Mhm.
and a lot. There was technology right in your face. Everything.
Oh
I
yeah.
think this was a reasonable amount, and I didn't think it got in the way of the story. The
Mhm.
parts of this one that I did not particularly care about were the fact that it just didn't seem finished.
Mhm.
Almost gave that taste of like a Temple of Elemental Evil, where the nodes were a cool concept, and all we got was an outline and a map.
Oh yeah.
And
Yeah.
I kind of felt that way with the Demonweb pits, like, oh, cool concept and everything.
Mhm.
And we did get some interesting adventure encounters, um,
Mhm.
and then some potentially really interesting entire
Oh
world
yeah. Yeah.
that you would get a paragraph to describe a whole world.
Yeah.
And it was just kind of like, wow, we could have done a lot more with that. And it's like, how do you game master that? You go through this portal and here's a world, and we're going to give you a
Yeah.
paragraph on how to describe that entire world.
Mhm.
So I sort of felt that it was just not complete.
Yeah.
But it was like it had some great ideas and
Mhm.
great start to things. And if they maybe gave it another 20, 30 pages, or made it a double size, maybe make it a 64-page adventure, like maybe it could have
Mhm.
really been pretty amazing.
Yeah.
So I think that was kind of the downside to me. The spider ship part, I actually really didn't mind, and
Yeah.
and and I was kind of okay with it, kind of okay
Mhm.
with it. There were some parts I wasn't too thrilled with it, but it also reminded me more of a dungeon crawl and like kind of going into a castle or something like that. So I
Yeah.
didn't mind that
I
part
mean,
of
it felt like something that might be on another plane. I remember enjoying the tables. I
it.
I know there was like the engine room, and then I guess the main control room or bridge or whatever it was.
Yep.
And there were tables. If you messed with the buttons and started pulling sticks and basically playing around, the characters could, overheat things and make the ship walk and all kinds of. And that I love. That kind
Yeah.
of. I'm a sucker. You give me a random table, I'm a big sucker for that. So. Um,
So, what did any redeeming qualities that you liked about this adventure?
Yeah, I mean, kind of backing up on what you said, um, I really I like the other planar stuff. I like the portals to other planes. That's something I enjoy. But like you, It's such a stretch for the DM to climb there. It only reminds me how much now we sort of more hold the DM's hand through modules because there's so much work on the DM's back in this one that now if you have a really industrious DM, they could take those worlds and they could do, several sessions of play in each world and they could just drag this thing out. You could play a year in this module, and just have the characters really go nuts. I think with the right DM and the right group, I could see people having a ball with that and just finding one of these, other realms that they really find cool and adopting a cause in there and going in there to defeat the vampire or whatever it was and going and doing that thing and the DM running with that. But my goodness, does the DM have to run on their feet with this one, so that's definitely a factor.
Yeah, yeah. I think I like the best part. Two things I really kind of cared for. I did like the alternate spell tables, not the spell tables, but the way that magic was altered. The way
Oh
that
yeah.
that spells did not necessarily work. Even magic items did not necessarily work the way you expected them to work. So I thought that was kind of cool, and they gave you that. And it was literally pages were designated to that. So I thought that was kind of cool. And I actually thought it was kind of cool that you did get full stats for the Queen of Spiders at the end,
hmm
which I thought was really neat. And if I recall, she did not have many hit points, but she had that armor class of minus
Oh
10.
yeah.
She was in spider form, I believe.
I the
Human,
only the only -10, right?
I
That I
think
remember
I
ever
don't
seeing.
recall another -10 out there. I don't even think the Tarask had a -10. I mean, the
Yeah.
Tarask had all kinds of
Yeah.
crazy abilities and stuff,
Yeah.
but yeah, I remember, and I think they said somewhere that she was originally supposed to just be a demon, and then they eventually turned her into a goddess or a demon goddess or
Yeah,
whatever.
demigod, yeah.
So I thought that was kind of neat. So I mean, those parts were kind of neat, and I think it did give you that inspiration of, oh, if they're going to go to the outer planes or something,
hmm
magic's going to work differently here.
Yeah.
So I thought that was an interesting sidebar of
hmm
that you could take and you could run with, and I think a lot of other designers after the fact have run and done some cool things with that.
Oh
So
yeah. Yeah, no, I remember when I first saw those chaos rules, it sort of harkened me mentally back to the DMG when Gygax presented the underwater rules, like if
yeah,
you were to cast a wall of ice underwater, what would happen? And I remember
yep,
that being a really fun section of the DMG for me to read. And it had that feel where, dishes would appear in the air and fall to the ground and all this crazy stuff. And I just
yeah,
remember kind of smiling reading that stuff because again, I'm a sucker for anything with random effects, anything where my players do something and I tell them to roll the dice and we see what happens, like together, player and DM both see what happens. I think that's just always fun because it's just that unpredictability, it kind of makes for laughs at the table. So definitely like that part of it. I think it's fun. Again, I can't help but wonder what direction this might have gone. I remember also reading that Gygax might have involved actually the Elder Elemental God in this final installment and had some situation where maybe the players were playing one kind of god against the other, so to speak, or some kind of mechanization in that way. And obviously that would have been a very different take. So I just find that kind of background information now I find fascinating.
yeah. That
You
would have still been a Kydak's thing to do,
Yeah.
actually. To actually,
Looking at what he did with the Temple of Elemental Evil, with how
yeah,
many, powers he had involved in the background of that, right? You can totally see him doing that kind of thing here.
yeah, exactly, exactly. So, all right, that's number 14,
All right.
Q1 of the Demonweb pit. So again, surprise, surprise. But that's why these lists are cool. These lists are cool because of surprises like that. So,
Mhm.
liking it. So, all right, so we're gonna go to our number 13, which is coming up next right now.
Number 13.
All right.
Hey, all right.
So
There's a favorite.
yeah, there is. I 3 to 5, the Desert of Desolation. I'll go out on a limb and say I'm surprised this is as low as it is. I would
Hmm.
have expected this to be a little bit higher, but that's personal opinion. I
hmm
really, really love this. Would be top 5 for me, probably, if I was putting this list together. Um,
Interesting.
yeah, because this is just everything. It's just
hmm
the series altogether. We talked about the individual adventures and the shortcomings of each and everything, and one strays a little too far to this, and the other strays a little too far to that.
Yeah.
But but when you put all 3 together, in my
hmm
opinion, know, the sum of the parts, the old saying goes,
Yeah.
um, is where one really shines. And Tracy Hickman, you know, brilliant design, um, and classic Egyptian feel. You've got genies, you've got freaks,
Oh yeah.
you've got raiders, you've got you know, scorpions, spiders,
Mhm.
just you know, tombs, traps, puzzles. You got everything, and
Yeah.
it's just wonderful, wonderful, all put together and enjoyable. Um, and really wish I would have had a chance to redo this one.
Mhm. Yeah. No, I think this would definitely be on my candidates, my or list candidates short list.
Yeah,
Sure. I always say it, and I'm going to say it again. Like it's the quintessential Egyptian
yeah,
D&D adventure, I think, by which all others are judged. If, tomorrow Goodman Games asked me to write an Egyptian adventure, my first thought when I'd be putting, hands to keyboard would be, how could I make this really cool but not be Pharaoh kind of thing,
yep,
because
exactly.
you know there's that bar and you want to be inspired by it but not copy it. So it's kind of, it's just that's what it is. It literally is like an Egyptian monolith that stands there that we compare all, or at least I do compare all Egyptian kind of themed adventures against. So the fact that it is that, the fact that it holds that place, I think if you grab any player who knows classic adventures and you just say to them, name your favorite Egyptian adventure, they'll say this series or they'll say Pharaoh or some part of it,
Yeah,
probably Pharaoh, I think, because I think that tends to be most people's favorite and it's certainly mine. But
yeah, agreed.
uh I just think 9 out of 10 people, this is what they would say if
Yeah.
you ask them. And that's just such a compliment, to
And
Hick.
and I think it's because of that. It's got everything.
Yeah,
It has everything
yeah,
that you want and need,
yeah,
all packaged up together. It's
yeah,
got NPCs. It's got some new monsters. You know, there's probably something it's probably lacking. A lot of really good, compelling new monsters. There's the Dust Digger, which I love,
yeah.
obviously. Um, but you know, it doesn't have a whole lot of compelling brand new monsters.
Yeah.
But there's traps, there's puzzles,
Oh
there's
yeah.
high magic. I mean, there's story.
Yeah.
You know, there's lots of
Oh
story.
yeah. No, there's
NPC.
definitely,
Yeah,
and you can lean in on any part. That's what I like. Like I'm
yeah,
a traps guy, so I can run Pharaoh and there's so many traps. It's, you got, as soon as I saw that maze, I was grinning
yeah,
like an idiot. I
yeah,
remember when I saw that, I did what I think most people did when they bought these things. I go right to the map, right to the back, look at the monsters, look at the map. And I remember seeing that map, and that one level was so obviously like a sort of little maze.
yeah,
And I was just like, this is great. I
yeah,
couldn't wait to get my players in there. But for people who are a little more into the role playing, they could lean maybe a little more into the second installment of the series. And then, there is a very wild, magical kind of wrap up toward the end. And, again, like you said, we've talked about the individual deficiencies, and there are definitely pros and cons to each element. But as a package, as we're viewing it in the list tonight for this entry being all three as a whole, it's got all the Egyptian, like you said. I mean, you've got your traps, you've got all your classic Egyptian tropes, you've got, abandoned ruins to explore, you've got sandboxy elements where you can hex crawl across the desert, and yet you've
yes,
got fantastical magical sort of things like the glass sea and these kind of
yeah,
conveyances like that are just very otherworldly, very fantasy bound,
yeah.
so it feels like modern day, it feels like our Egypt, and yet it feels fantasy, and it's just, it's a nice merging of the two. So
Mhm. And then when they combined them and put them all together as the three, they actually added a little extra material to it, and they actually fleshed it out a little bit, the connective tissue a bit, and did kind of a nice job
yeah,
on it. Like, you know, we've talked about sometimes when they did those compilations after
yep,
some that, you know, like the Giants one GDQ, 1 through 7, they really didn't do a whole lot to them. You know,
hmm,
really just basically stitched them together and everything. Whereas against the slave lords, they really spent a lot of time and actually designated a lot of extra pages of material to it.
yeah,
This was probably somewhere between the two,
yeah, yep,
um, but caught a nice balance, I thought. And
hmm,
you said added a little bit to the hex crawl part of it and just fleshed it out a little bit more, um, to see. I mean, there is definitely some drawbacks to these. You know, the kind of the that at times the player characters can seem like they're just on the sidelines and the big powerful things are doing all the
Yeah.
heroic parts. You know, so there's that. And again, at times the second adventure probably gets a little bit too many NPCs and a little
Hmm.
too bogged down and you know maybe not quite enough action or not
Hmm.
quite you know adventure material in there. But again, when you throw in there the sky sea like you mentioned, the sea of glass, and the actual pyramid, you did get that nice classic pyramid too,
Hmm.
and then the maze, and then yeah, there was that one trap with the teleporting pit where you get to the bottom of the pit and you're
Hmm.
teleported, right? You just infinite loop and everything, just things like that
Yeah.
that are just really make it stand and make it shine above a lot of other adventures at the time. And this is also Pharaoh started this. All three had that new encounter design,
Mm.
which
Right.
for better or for worse worked. I think it worked
Hmm.
at times, and at other times it did not work.
Agreed. Yeah. Agreed.
All the bits and pieces in there, or it was sometimes it would get very disjointed. But like when you did have a puzzle or a trick or something like that, or NPC or something, it did certainly. It was a great attempt to you know put that information at the game master's hands a little bit differently on
Hmm.
the recipe.
Yeah.
And I like that, and I think it could have been, you know, I think it was a bold attempt. It didn't work all the way, no,
Hmm.
but it still it was a nice try at things. Whereas
Oh yeah.
alternative was like sometimes the Gygax run on paragraph where the
Yeah.
tactics, the treasure, the NPC, and you know the description of the room was all in that same paragraph.
Oh
And
yeah.
forget about ever trying to while you're at the game table suss that all out and everything. So
Yeah.
you know this was a nice attempt to do that. I thought, and probably
Oh
needed
yeah. And
taking.
it's easy to forget how formulative that is and how kind of bold it was for Hickman in multiple modules to try different things.
Yeah,
Because like you said, we kind of forget how much in a way the organization was a hot mess in the original
yeah,
module. You know, the story I always tell, everybody knows I love C2, you know, Timochin. But I remember bringing it to Gen Con one time, way back when, thinking I was going to run it, and then reading it on the plane. And I hadn't read it at that point in person. I still kind of knew it pretty well, but I hadn't actually read the text in years. And I remember opening it on the plane, the original module, and reading it. And I was like, oh my goodness, I just saw this, you know, all this sans serif text, and the monsters will just be inserted somewhere in the middle of the description.
yeah,
Sometimes, you know, like Gygax or whoever would start by telling you there's some, you know, a pile of turnips on the table or something. And then sentences later, they would mention that there was an ogre in the room. And
yep,
it's just so different from the way we do things now. And for the poor DM, I guess DMs, we dealt with it back then and we were used to it. But I think if you took a DM now and you threw that kind of lack of organization at them, it would really be a big issue. So
agreed.
yeah, it's easy to forget like these innovations, how bold they were. And like you said, they didn't always work. Sometimes it was clunky and it would bifurcate things into different pieces where you'd get a little bit of the trap here and then you'd have to look to the next section to get some other, you know, how the trap was disarmed or this or that. But I give them credit for trying. I give them credit for going there because I really feel like that was the first rungs in the ladder to where we are today, you know?
Yeah, agreed. I 100%, 100%. So, yeah, I never get tired of those adventures. Never get tired of flipping through those and looking at those awesome traps and like you said, just all the little bits and interesting bits, the puzzles and the riddles and
Oh yeah,
a lot of good stuff there.
a
A lot of
must.
really good stuff there. So, all right, I think we're going to move on to our next number. So, our next number up is number 12 on our
Okay.
list.
Number 12.
Number 12, a Dark Tower. This is it's interesting.
Hmm.
This could be a little bit of Goodman Games biased. I will throw it out there. Obviously, since we did the OAR treatment to this one very recently,
Yeah.
it just literally came out earlier this year. You know, so there could be some bias in this, but you know, at number 12, I think that's a very respectable number. If folks
Hmm.
recall, this was number 21 on the dungeon list.
Okay, I knew it was
Um,
on the list,
Yep,
so.
it was the only non-TSR adventure on
Mhm.
the dungeon list that was 20 years ago. On the top,
Mm.
came in at number 21, a respectable number, and
Mhm.
this one coming at 12 is it's probably a little elevated, probably.
Yeah, like you
But
said, it might have been on some people's minds that Goodman came.
yeah,
So it could be a
several folks,
subconscious thing, you know?
yeah, several folks on our panelists directly worked on this adventure. So, and some of us got to live it for the better part of a year. So, but
There
I
you go.
think by Janelle Jacquet's, this is probably you know the classic in my opinion. The maps are just let me tell you, and I can tell you stories about the map. The maps are
Hmm.
complicated. It's like you cannot just look at these maps and figure it all out,
Yeah.
and they were not labeled the way they probably should have. There was a side view map, and it was actually wrong in the adventure. We fixed it in our version because it was not correct, and that would just added more to the confusion. But that was part of it. That was what this adventure did. The fact that the maps were complicated, because back in those days, mapping the dungeon was a huge, huge part of adventuring.
Yeah.
Uh, yes, it was about killing monsters and grabbing treasure, but mapping it and figuring out where you were was one of the challenges of it. So by doing this complicated with all these ins and outs, and this level can lead to that level, and this can go to
Mhm.
here, and you can jump. All of a sudden, you can be on the lower level, and and not know it. A teleporter here, a teleporter there. That is what really makes this one shine. I think one of the reasons that makes it shine, that interconnectivity of all the different
Oh,
levels,
yeah.
so ways in,
Yeah.
and just mind-boggling that this was done in 1979,
Mhm.
published in 80, really before other adventure modules were even hitting the market. I mean they were starting to get out there, but just you would look at this and say this was something that was inspired by other things that came before, but nope, this is what inspired a lot of these adventures afterwards.
Yeah.
And I think a lot of folks don't understand that part of the history of this.
Yeah. No, I think it can't, again, it's just one of those many things. I know I say this a lot, but it's so true with these classic adventures that we don't think as much about it now. But again, something very innovative at the time. And that whole, I guess, whatever you want to call it, turquoising of the dungeon, where you have that vertical connections and interconnectivity and multiple routes. Janelle's very famous for that. And what blows me away is that, this was her inaugural effort for
Mm-hmm.
Judges Guild.
Yeah,
I know there's some confusion of that because Thracia and this were both published in 79, but my understanding is that this one was worked on in 78 and published in 79, whereas the other one, Thracia, was worked
yeah.
on and published in 79. So this one is her first. It's kind of funny actually when you think about it, because the last thing she did, as far as I know, for Judges Guild was a RuneQuest adventure called Duck Tower, which was sort of take on this. So
Mm-hmm.
she went in with the tower, went out with the tower. But yeah, for this to be her first adventure for Judges
Yeah,
Guild and in 1979
yeah.
blows my mind. It's just just stuff in here that just way ahead of the curve.
Yes, yeah. Without
I think, people need to think like, why was this the only non TSR thing to show up on that original dungeon list? There's a reason.
oh
So,
yeah,
and there you have it. And even to be so high on our list as number 12, I think is pretty solid.
yeah. I mean, crazy that the NPCs. There's like over 75 different named NPCs.
Yeah.
And there's some crazy ones. There's an NPC that's teleported into a chest, and the chest can still cast spells and speak and stuff. There's a wizard that doesn't have a body anymore because of a magical experiment gone awry, and just magic jars into all, and it has all these other bodies like in a room, and then just jumps back and forth. Just amazing. Like you're like, wow, that's just so
Yeah.
interesting to read, interesting to play,
Yeah.
uh, just absolutely phenomenal. So you take the amazing maps, then you take some of the amazing, um, you know, uh, interactions of the NPCs, and the fact
Mhm.
that there's all this history in the dungeon, and then you've got the whole backstory of Set
Mhm.
and Mitra, battling out between each other,
Yeah.
uh, and 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 then probably the cherry on top of it all is the Sons of Set, the
Mhm.
basically taking demonic reptilian snake creatures or whatever and having, again, like you said, you're a sucker for random tables. All these random tables to determine what it looks like and what its abilities look like.
Yeah.
That hasn't been done yet. Like that was
Yeah.
so cutting edge, and it was like, and again, you could just take those tables and you could just roll some dice and create your own
Oh yeah.
Son of Set, and nobody else has that one. And
Yeah.
this unique comment, and those tables were huge. They were like a die
Yeah.
20, like
Oh no.
20 different special attacks. Roll three or
Yeah.
four times, and it was like it was cool. You get things that didn't make sense, but they were demons, and there
But it
was
was, but you know, the one thing to me you have to give Judges Guild back then is they weren't afraid to play around. They weren't
no,
afraid to give you
no,
random tables or try to give you a subsystem,
yeah, yep,
about gambling or about rumors or about political
yeah.
interactions or whatever. Like they would just throw that stuff. Sometimes they kind of throw it midstream into the
Oh,
adventure.
very
You
much
never
so.
knew where it was going to show up. But you got the fact that you got that, and you bring up a really good point. Like these really interesting personalized villains at a time when stat blocks for villain, where villains just kind of being a stat block was kind of more the thing. You didn't really get a lot of this personality and a lot of these quirks, and it was more just like they got +1 this and +1 that and +1 armor, and here you
Yeah,
go.
yeah,
And the DM really had to breathe the life into it. And then, like you said, that too, also that really good point, that great backstory that, as I understand, was kind of inspired by Conan stories of these factions fighting themselves within this dungeon. And I guess you see the Conan inspiration even as far as the
yeah.
gods mentioned, and clearly
Oh,
it shows.
yeah, yep,
Um, but yeah, just a lot of stuff again that just was ahead of its curve. uh Weighing the dungeon, now it's easy to find the hard points, I think, in it, but when you look back for when it came out, 1979, so much stuff in here that was ahead of its time.
yeah, yeah, very much so. I mean, I would have almost thought that this was written after somebody watched the original Conan movie. I mean, because you get the whole set and all, the whole spider, the spider, excuse me, all the snakes and but it was written before that, and it's
Yeah.
like I'm like I was like wow, and that's just fascinating to me because it's like I would have thought they were both like together. There was somehow spiritually attached somehow,
Yeah.
but
Yeah.
no, very different, and that just boggles my mind to think that. And yeah, so this is a crazy one, and obviously I was very lucky to be able to really I spent a lot of time in Dark Tower looking over those maps and trying to figure this maps out, having conversations with Tim of like, wait a minute, and like, where do you think this corridor goes? It's like it's not labeled, and I'm like, hey, could this go to here? And it's like,
That's funny.
yeah, and just
I'm sure yeah, I can only imagine I was not involved in the editing with the maps on this one, but I can only imagine. And we have a good comment by M Fergus 42 as far as there being a very much like Robert E. Howard Red Nails feel to this, and
yep,
it's
yeah,
totally true. If you go back into those Howard stories,
yep.
definitely for sure.
Yeah, without a doubt. So that is our number 12, which brings us to
All
one
right.
one for the evening. So we are going to unveil our number 11.
Number 11.
All right.
All right. There's a favorite too, right?
Yes, I won Dwellers of the Forbidden
So
City.
happy this got we're up where it is.
Yeah, I would have liked this one to crack the top 10, to be
I
honest,
know. I
but
know.
it's 11. So I mean, they can't all be.
11's pretty good. 11's pretty good.
It's knocking at the door. It's knocking at the door. So uh, this is again this is I won't say underappreciated a little bit,
Mhm.
um, but back in the time I know, I mean I enjoyed this one back in the 80s when I played it, but I think this one like a fine wine has gotten better over the years for a what it did, but also what it didn't do.
Mhm.
And I think that is yeah, I think we need to definitely discuss that. And I know we talked about it on our previous show, but just brilliant how you have an entire city
Mhm.
mapped out, but it's not described in its entirety, and there's only a
Yeah.
couple little locations that are described, and the rest of it is just go nuts, game master, and just put your own spin on it and just make it your own. And
Yeah.
again, back in the 80s, maybe that didn't resonate with me because
Mhm.
I think I wasn't as sure what I was doing as a
Mhm.
master, and I guess I wanted everything spelled out. But now I look at that and I think that is just such a beautiful design move,
Yeah.
and it's just a canvas waiting to be filled in, and
Mhm.
again something where you could set an easily set an entire campaign there. I
Oh
mean,
yeah. Yeah. Because here you're given, and it's a fine line, but here you're given to me just enough examples. You're given mini maps and a couple little fleshed out buildings. How I wish this city approach had been applied to the city in the Vault of the Draw. How cool
yeah,
would that have been if
would have been
Gygax would have given us a few areas in that city and then let us go nuts and a map of that city, but then
yeah,
let us, if we would have got just that extra nudge of detail in the vault to match what we got in this, I think it would have really raised that. Because for me, and I agree, when I got this, I was, again, pretty young when I picked this one up, and I remember reading, and I saw the map, but I went crazy. I remember looking
yeah,
at the city map and being like, whoa, this is awesome. And just, you kind of had me at Lost City. You say Jungle City or whatever, I'm in,
yeah,
period.
yep,
Even now, you said that I'm in. But it's kind of like when I actually got into the meat of it and realized that so many words were spent on getting into the city as opposed to what was in the city,
yep,
I was kind of like, wait a minute, where's the rest of the city here? But now I think if I ever want to if I wanted to run this, it would be work, but I think I would just kind of take that 6 months, build out a bunch of buildings, build out some encounter tables and, a few other things and maybe a few little kind of running encounters and just, run with it. And again, another one that would be really fun to see if this one got the ore treatment,
yeah, yeah.
where the Goodman authors would take it, because I think we could really make this one sing.
Yeah, because again, there was so much material, kind of like Lost City, how
Yeah.
you had those maps under there, and it was just
Yeah.
begging to be
Just enough to give, a
begging
good
to
writer a
be
little starting point, a little foundation to have their imagination go whoop. So
exactly,
yeah.
exactly. So this one, also another tournament adventure, which I was not aware of back in the
No,
day.
and it doesn't feel like it
It
to me.
doesn't, it doesn't.
It
It really,
doesn't have that
yeah,
nonsensical, puzzly feeling that I hate from some of the tournament mod. This one feels more real based to me.
yeah. I think if I recall correctly, the tournament parts of it was the actual getting into the city. I believe
Mhm.
was the actual tournament part.
Makes
Um,
sense.
but also classic new
Oh
monsters
yeah.
that
Yeah.
have that were basically unveiled and just have become staples of D&D
Hmm.
all the years. The Ebolith, the Yontai,
Yeah.
the Bullywugs, even the Mongrel Men. And again, if the Mongrel Men, if I recall, there was a table to kind of
Hmm.
determine appearance a little bit, and I think they can have variable attacks and stuff based on if they had like a claw arm or
Yeah.
if I recall. So that part was really cool. I think this was written by David Cook, Zeb Cook, and he went on to be one of the architects of second edition,
Mhm.
and was really if I recall, this was like he submitted this adventure, and this is how he got hired. I think from TSR, if I recall,
Mm.
that's the way
Okay.
it goes. Like he submitted that, and they really liked it, and I guess they had further conversations, and I think they accepted it, and I think they then offered him a job after that. So I believe if that's I could be wrong on that, but I think that's how the story goes. But fascinating, and again, you have the factions in there, which was very classic Gygax. Have the different factions. You could pit the factions against each other
Yeah.
if you wanted to. So yeah, just a lot of really good stuff here. But like I say, more I think I was more impressed after the years of just what wasn't there and
Hmm.
and what you could do with it
Yeah.
versus actual stuff was there. Were those encounters amazing? No, no, not at all. But it was more the what you could do with it all. Like you said, it would take some serious, serious work to kind of to
Oh
do.
yeah. No, you'd have to put your time in for sure.
Yeah, and I love your analogy about Vault to the Drow. I never really thought of it that way
Mhm.
about how wow, yeah, you could, obviously, trying to design any like medieval city is a Herculean task. I mean,
Yeah.
there's just
Oh
so
yeah.
many details, and you really, I mean, you have to understand architecture, you got to understand society, you understand economic, all these different things.
Yeah.
But you're right. Giving just that framework and giving
Mhm.
just those enough bits and pieces to kind of
Yeah.
piece it all together and it makes something useful. It's like that is would be a brilliant product and everything. And I know for a lost city, you don't need to do most of those things because it's ruins. So,
Mhm.
but still fascinating. And I think you see a little bit of that with I know that was our design philosophy with Caverns of Thracia.
Mhm.
Caverns of Thracia was also set in the jungle, and you got this above ground map, if you will, and there was like 5 or 6 locations, and the rest of it even says on the map more jungle this way, more jungle that way. But the implication there was an entire city
Mhm.
that was just waiting. So it was great when we were approaching Caverns of Thracia. That what could we do for additional material? That was just a natural thing. It's like, well, let's expand the city out. And I
Mhm.
remember actually giving Scott the instructions when we assigned Scott that task. And I said, go look at I-1, Dwellers of the Forbidden City, and like give us a map and just detail some of the locations, but leave other locations completely open and
Yeah.
open for the game master to do what I want. So get some random encounter tables in there, get some things in there to get some tools in there to do some stuff.
Mhm.
But for the most part, just let the game master give them
Oh
the
yeah. Yeah.
run. So uh, yeah. Any other thoughts on I-1?
No, just I mean again, it stands out to me, I guess, also as kind of one of your major sandbox early adventures. I mean, when you mentioned sandbox to me, I think of this and I think of the Isle of Dread. Those are the two
Yeah.
that, jump out as being the, ultimate classic sandbox adventures. I think that everybody kind of fondly thinks back of. And I'm actually pleased. Like, there was a point where I felt like when I was younger that this one fell a little more under the radar for whatever reason. I
Yeah.
felt like Isle
Agreed.
of Dread got the press and this one didn't.
Yeah.
But
Well,
now more,
dinosaurs.
you
Dinosaurs.
know,
You know.
but now more and more when I speak to kind of the old grognard gamers, the people of our age, especially, like I feel like this is now starting to get the attention that,
Agreed.
it's like N1. It's starting to pick up traction and jump
Yeah.
on a lot of more of these classic lists. And it's so nice to see that because I've always loved this one.
Yeah, I could not agree with you more on that. Without a doubt, without a doubt. I think I also read that this was originally supposed to be S4. And
Interesting.
yeah, and it wasn't for, and I don't know what the reasoning behind that was, but I thought I read that somewhere. And again, I'm hoping I'm not confusing this another, but I thought this was originally supposed to be S4 because it was a tournament adventure again.
Mhm.
And the S series was the tournament adventure. But I think that they're getting to that point where
Yeah.
they utilizing all, not all, but a lot of the tournament adventures for publication, the C's, obviously the A's, and where they figure, well, we can't make them all S1, S1, S2, S3, S4. So, um,
Yeah.
and then I think they moved it off into a different direction. But yeah, definitely one. This is one, folks, that if you don't have this, what is it, like 4.99 on Drive Through
Oh,
RPG?
yeah.
Like
Just
this
fine.
is something that you should get where, you know,
Yeah.
like, don't ignore the stats. You could use it in today's game without
Oh,
them.
yeah.
You'll have it's just it's worth it. It's
Yeah.
certainly
Yeah.
the effort to play with it. So that is it. That's another
Mhm.
show. So that
Solid
was
group.
number
Solid
15. Oh,
group. We're
real
getting down
well,
into.
Forbidden City was number 13 on the Dungeon Magazine list. I just
Oh, okay. All right, that's close. Two
Yeah,
away.
and we had it as 11. So we're doing
And
good
I'm
work.
happier it's higher on our list. So,
Yeah. Definitive Desolation was number 5 actually on the dungeon list, and so
wow.
yeah, so it's interesting to kind of compare and contrast like where these are like
Yeah.
showing. And I think it's definitely interesting to see. And folks, we are into the top 10. So we have 2 more shows. We're gonna do 10 through 6, and then we're gonna do 1 through 5, and then next month we'll be back right at you the last week of it'll be spooky season, officially spooky season show. And then we'll get into the top 10, and then we'll have a close down show to round out the year. So Rick, tell them what you got to tell them.
Yeah. So, as usual, folks, we're thrilled you could join us. Please follow us if you haven't been already, or if you're catching this later on YouTube. We always ask that you give us a like or subscribe to the Goodman Games official channel if you're not already. That way you know what's coming from us. That helps us out. As Chris mentioned, next one is coming to you at the spooky season. We're going to be back at you on October 27th at 8 p.m., the usual bad time. And you definitely want to be there because we're cracking the Big Ten. We're into the final 10. So very exciting. Some things I totally expect will be there, but where they're going to be, I don't even know. So
Yep.
we'll see together, folks.
Awesome. So thanks everybody for spending a little bit of your Sunday night with us. And with that, I'm going to get back to vacation time and watching my Ravens on TV. So everybody have a great rest of your night and a wonderful rest of the month of September. And the next time we see you guys, we will be into October, and October almost be done. And believe it or not, the holidays will be right around the corner. My, how the time flies. So with that, everybody have a wonderful good night, and we'll see you for now.
Good night, folks.